Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to your cozy corner of dreaming lore. Before we drift into tonight's tale, take a moment to settle in. The world outside is growing dim, and now it's time to relax, let go of the day, and slip into the quiet rhythm of our story. So, lights low, blankets up, and let's begin. As the first rays of dawn began to touch the rooftops, the marketplace would once again come alive, but not in the same way it had the night before. The early morning was a time of renewal, as if the marketplace itself had taken a deep breath during the night and now exhaled once more. The familiar hum of conversation, the clink of coins, the bustling of carts, these were the sounds that would fill the air. But this time, the atmosphere felt different. There was a stillness, almost as if the marketplace knew something was coming, something that would shift the balance that had held for so long. On this morning, there was a quiet tension in the air. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, and a light mist hung over the streets. The merchants set up their stalls with purpose, their movements steady but hurried. There was talk among the crowd of a visiting noble, someone of high status who had come to inspect the town's trades and decide on the future of the market itself. His arrival had stirred the usual gossip and excitement, but more importantly, it had brought a sense of uncertainty. The townspeople were unsure how this noble would affect their lives, whether his presence would bring benefits or hardships. The day before had passed like many others, with the customary exchanges and transactions. An old woman purchasing vegetables for her soup, a merchant peddling his silk scarves, a young man with an armful of fresh flowers trying to woo the ladies of the town. But today felt different. The air was heavy with expectation, as though the marketplace could sense a shift was coming. Among the crowd was a young woman named Elira, a weaver known for her skill in crafting beautiful tapestries. She had spent years perfecting her craft, learning from masters and working diligently to create pieces that told stories of the land and its people. Her stall was modest, with intricate patterns woven into each fabric, and yet her work was highly sought after. The noble's visit had the potential to change everything for her, for her kind of art, like many others, was often overlooked by those in power. Yet, if the right eyes fell upon her work, it could be the key to a future far beyond the marketplace. Elira's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion further down the street. The crowd parted, and in the midst of them, a tall figure emerged. He was dressed in fine clothes, his face stern, his eyes scanning the area with the sharpness of someone who had seen much in his life. His entourage followed closely behind, their faces impassive, but their eyes alert, watching for any sign of trouble. The noble had arrived. As the noble moved through the marketplace, his eyes flicked over the wares of the vendors, not lingering on any one item for too long. The people parted respectfully, their voices hushed. There was a moment of stillness before the usual hum of activity returned, but it was a quiet hum now, one laced with apprehension. The noble, whose name was Lord Aldrich, was known in nearby towns for his reputation as a collector of rare and valuable goods. It was said that he had a keen eye for treasures, but it was also whispered that he had a particular interest in certain rarities, those that were not so easily acquired through legal means. As he moved through the market, his gaze seemed to linger on certain stalls, his sharp eyes picking up on the smallest details. To some, it was flattering. To others, it was a warning. Elira watched him carefully, her heart pounding as she adjusted one of the tapestries on display. She had heard the stories, of course, the ones that spoke of the noble's penchant for dealing with the darker side of trade, of things that could not be bought or sold openly. She had heard rumors that his wealth was built on more than just his land and trade deals. There were whispers of shady exchanges and unspoken debts, of things hidden in the shadows of the marketplace. Still, Elira held hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the noble's interest would fall on her work. The thought of her tapestries being displayed in a grand hall, seen by those with influence and power, made her heart race with excitement. But there was a part of her that also feared what such attention might bring. She had always been content with her quiet life in the marketplace, weaving her stories into the fabric of the town, never seeking the spotlight. As Lord Aldrich continued his rounds, a change seemed to come over the marketplace. The familiar hum of commerce now felt more like an undercurrent of tension, as though everyone was waiting for the moment when the noble would make his choice. Would he favor the merchants of fine goods, or would he find something in the humble stalls, something that would catch his eye and open the door to a new world for them all? Lord Aldrich stopped in front of a stall, his gaze falling on a basket of rare herbs. He reached down, inspecting the leaves with care. The merchant, an elderly man with shaky hands, stood by, unsure of whether to speak or remain silent. A tense moment passed, and then the noble spoke. "These herbs," Lord Aldrich said, his voice low and deliberate. "I have not seen these before." "Where did they come from?" The merchant, eager for the noble's approval, answered quickly. "From the distant hills, my lord. They are known to have healing properties. Rare indeed, but they are nothing more than humble herbs, grown by the villagers." Lord Aldrich's eyes narrowed slightly as he examined the herbs further, his fingers brushing over the delicate leaves. After a moment of silence, he looked up, his expression unreadable. "Tell me," he said slowly, "where did you acquire these herbs?" The merchant's throat tightened. His gaze flicked nervously over the crowd before answering. "From a traveler, my lord. He passed through not long ago, offering them for sale. Said they were worth more than gold, but I didn't know their true value." A subtle change came over the noble's expression. Something darker, perhaps, but still veiled. He straightened, turning to leave without another word, his entourage following closely behind. The marketplace fell quiet once more, the tension lingering in the air. As Lord Aldrich departed, Elira's heart pounded in her chest. Something about the exchange had unsettled her, though she couldn't quite place why. Perhaps it was the way the merchant had answered, the subtle hint of fear in his voice. Or maybe it was the way the noble's gaze had lingered on the herbs for just a moment too long. Whatever it was, she felt that the marketplace was not the same anymore. Something had shifted, something that would not soon be forgotten. As the day wore on, the people resumed their trade, but the whisper of the noble's visit echoed in their conversations, in the air itself. No one could quite say what had happened, but all felt that it was a moment that marked the beginning of something else, something unknown. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, the market grew quieter, and Elira found herself contemplating the future. The world outside the marketplace was changing, and she could sense that the marketplace itself would soon be caught up in it. As the days passed, the tension that had gripped the marketplace seemed to settle, but it was clear that the noble's visit had left its mark. The people moved through their daily routines with an air of caution, as though they were all waiting for the next moment when the world around them might change again. The whispers of the marketplace now carried new stories, stories of the noble, Lord Aldrich, and the mysterious herbs that had been examined with such strange interest. The marketplace, once a place of steady commerce and peaceful exchanges, had now become a space where secrets were more valuable than ever. For Elira, the weaver, life continued in its quiet rhythm. She returned to her stall, her hands weaving the intricate patterns of another tapestry, each thread carrying the weight of her hopes and fears. Her thoughts often drifted to the noble's visit, to the way his eyes had scanned the marketplace, and to the air of secrecy that had settled over the town like a fog. She could not shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface, something that might change everything. It wasn't long before the rumors began to spread. One evening, as Elira was finishing her work, a familiar face appeared at her stall. A young man, no older than she, with an earnest look on his face and a nervous energy in his steps. His name was Thomas, and he was one of the town's many apprentices, always running errands or helping the local merchants. His presence was usually unremarkable, but tonight there was a certain urgency in his eyes. "Elira," he began, his voice low, "you've heard about the herbs, haven't you?" She nodded, the memory of the noble's inspection fresh in her mind. "The town's in an uproar about them," Thomas continued, glancing around as if to ensure no one was listening. "It seems that Lord Aldrich has taken a particular interest in them. And not just the herbs. There's talk of a bigger trade, one that's not being done in the open." Elira's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not sure of the details," Thomas said, his eyes darting nervously. "But word has it that Lord Aldrich has been meeting with certain merchants, those who deal in rarities, in things that can't be sold openly. There's talk of an exchange, a deal being struck for something far more valuable than herbs." Elira's mind raced. The thought of being involved in such a secretive trade was both thrilling and terrifying. It was the kind of opportunity that could change her life forever. But it also carried the risk of drawing attention from forces she didn't fully understand. The shadowy side of the marketplace, the one she had always avoided, now seemed impossible to ignore. Thomas leaned closer, his voice barely audible. "I don't know what exactly it is, but some say the noble's interests go beyond just herbs. There's something he wants, something no one can quite place. And the word on the street is that he's willing to pay a high price for it." Elira's fingers stilled, the tapestry she was weaving suddenly forgotten. Her thoughts were consumed with the idea of what Lord Aldrich might be after. What could be so valuable that it would drive a noble to such lengths? And what would it mean for her and the marketplace if she became part of this hidden world? Thomas straightened, his eyes filled with unease. "You didn't hear this from me, Elira. But I think you should be careful. Things are changing in the marketplace, and not all the changes are for the better." Before she could respond, Thomas turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Elira standing in silence. His words lingered in the air, heavy with implication. The marketplace had always been a place of steady rhythm, where things were predictable and familiar. But now, it felt like the ground beneath her feet was shifting. The next few days passed slowly, each one marked by the quiet tension that had settled over the town. The noble's presence had become a constant undercurrent in the marketplace, and every vendor, every merchant, seemed to carry a quiet awareness that something was happening, something beyond their understanding. Even the familiar faces of the townsfolk seemed to carry an air of uncertainty, as though they were all waiting for something, but no one knew what. Elira spent her days at her stall, weaving her tapestries, her mind often drifting back to Thomas's words. She could feel the weight of the rumors pressing down on her, as if the marketplace itself had become a place of secrets. The vibrant colors of her threads seemed less vivid against the backdrop of this growing unease. Her craft, once a way to tell stories of the land and its people, now seemed almost trivial in comparison to the mysterious forces at play just beneath the surface. One afternoon, as Elira was closing her stall, she noticed something unusual. A figure stood at the edge of the market, watching her intently. The person was cloaked in dark robes, their face obscured, but there was something about their posture that made Elira's skin prickle with unease. She couldn't quite place it, but there was a sense of familiarity in the way they stood, as though they had been waiting for this very moment. Before Elira could react, the figure stepped forward, their footsteps soft but purposeful on the cobblestones. As they neared her stall, they pulled back their hood, revealing a face she recognized. It was a man who had once been a regular at the market, a quiet figure who traded in rare goods. His name was Alden, and he had always been an enigmatic presence in the town. No one knew much about him, and he seemed content to keep it that way. "Elira," Alden said softly, his voice smooth and almost hypnotic. "I think you've been hearing things. Things about the noble's interest in the market, and perhaps things about the herbs." Elira's heart skipped a beat. She nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. Alden smiled, but it was not a reassuring smile. "There's more to this than you know. Much more, and I think you're the key to understanding it." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and as he turned to leave, Elira felt a shiver run down her spine. What was it that Alden knew, and how was she connected to whatever secret was unfolding in the marketplace? As the days stretched on, Elira found herself drawn deeper into the strange currents that seemed to swirl around the marketplace. The conversations, once light and casual, now carried an undercurrent of something more sinister. The merchants, the craftsmen, and the townsfolk all spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the shadows as if they feared being overheard. Even the sun, which had always cast a warm, comforting glow over the marketplace, now seemed to hang in the sky like a distant observer, casting long, heavy shadows that felt out of place. Elira's thoughts were consumed by Alden's words, by the way he had appeared at her stall, and the unsettling smile he had given her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had somehow become involved in something much larger than herself, something far beyond the simple trade of fabrics and tapestries that had once been her world. She found herself questioning everything, the whispers, the rumors, the way the market had changed since Lord Aldrich's visit. It all seemed to point toward something hidden, something dangerous, and yet Elira couldn't bring herself to look away. The stall was quieter than usual one afternoon, the lull in activity providing Elira with the space to think. The air was thick with the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery, and the murmur of distant conversations created a soft, almost dreamlike atmosphere. But in the back of her mind, there was an unease that refused to leave her. She had been hearing strange things about Alden, rumors that he was more than just a simple trader. Some said he was involved in the black market, dealing in goods that were better left untouched. Others whispered that he had connections to those who had dealings with Lord Aldrich himself. But no one had concrete answers. No one knew for sure what Alden was involved in, or what he wanted with the herbs and the marketplace. All Elira knew was that the fabric of her life, once so simple and predictable, had begun to unravel in ways she couldn't control. As she sat quietly at her stall, lost in thought, a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she saw a familiar face, Tomas, the young apprentice who had warned her before. He was holding something in his hand, a small parchment wrapped in twine, its edges frayed and worn. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and urgency. "Elira, you have to see this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "It's for you." She took the parchment from him, her hands trembling slightly as she unwrapped it. Inside, she found a single sentence, written in ink that had smudged slightly, as though it had been hurriedly written. "The herbs are only the beginning. Meet me at midnight, behind the old mill, if you want to know more." There was no signature, no indication of who had left it for her, but Elira didn't need to know. The words were clear enough. She knew that this was her chance to understand what was happening in the marketplace, to uncover the mystery that seemed to be unfolding just beyond her reach. Tomas stood silently, watching her carefully. "I don't know who left that for you, Elira," he said, his voice trembling. "But I've heard things. Things that make me think that whoever this is, they're dangerous. You have to be careful." Elira looked at him, her mind racing. She had heard the rumors too, the ones about Alden, about Lord Aldrich, and the darker forces at play in the marketplace. But she also knew that she couldn't turn away. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that could unravel everything and reveal the truth behind the strange events that had been brewing. "I'll be careful," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in her mind. "I have to go. I have to know what's happening." Thomas hesitated, his face etched with concern. "Just promise me you won't do anything foolish. Whatever is going on, it's bigger than both of us." "I promise," Elira said, her voice firm. "I just need to understand." With that, Thomas gave her a last, lingering look before turning and disappearing into the crowd, leaving Elira alone with her thoughts. As the day drew to a close, Elira's mind was consumed with the meeting behind the old mill. The marketplace, which had always felt like a place of comfort and familiarity, now seemed distant, as though it no longer belonged to her. The sense of unease that had taken root in her heart grew with every passing moment. The shadows grew longer, and the cool evening air settled around her like a blanket. The old mill, hidden just beyond the edge of the town, had always been a place that people avoided. It was a relic from a time long past, its wheels no longer turning, its walls weathered and cracked from years of neglect. The mill had once been a bustling hub of activity, where grain was ground and flour was produced. But now it stood silent, a symbol of the past that the town had outgrown. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting, hidden from the watchful eyes of the townsfolk. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Elira found herself walking through the quiet streets, the dim light of the moon guiding her path. She moved with purpose, her heart beating in her chest like a drum, the weight of the evening pressing down on her. The air was cold, and the streets were eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The marketplace, which had been so full of life just hours before, now felt distant and forgotten, its vibrancy replaced by a sense of emptiness that echoed in the night. When Elira reached the old mill, she paused for a moment, her breath visible in the cold air. The mill loomed in front of her, its silhouette dark against the night sky. The windows were dark, and there was no sign of life. Yet she knew, deep down, that someone was waiting for her inside. She took a deep breath and pushed open the creaking door. The sound echoed through the empty space, but there was no turning back now. She stepped inside, the floorboards creaking beneath her feet. The air inside was damp and musty. The the smell of old wood and decay filling her nostrils. She moved slowly, carefully, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. And then she saw him, Alden, standing in the far corner of the room, his dark eyes glinting in the dim light. "Elira," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I've been waiting for you." The silence in the mill was thick, almost suffocating. Elira stood in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest as she took in the figure of Alden. His presence seemed to fill the room, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel as though she were standing on the edge of something she couldn't yet see. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, the mystery of the market, the herbs, and Lord Aldrich swirling in the space around them. Alden stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. His cloak brushed the floor with each step, and Elira could hear the soft rustle of fabric as he approached. His face was calm, almost serene, but there was something about him, something in the way he moved, that felt out of place, as if he were more than just a man, more than just a merchant. It was as if he were part of the very shadows of the marketplace, connected to it in ways she couldn't understand. "You've come," Alden said, his voice a smooth murmur that seemed to echo in the stillness of the room. "I knew you would." Elira hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is this about, Alden? What do you want from me?" Alden's lips curled into a faint smile, and for a moment, he looked almost amused by her question. "It's not about what I want from you, Elira. It's about what you're ready to understand. The marketplace, the herbs, the noble, everything is connected, and you are at the center of it." Elira's mind raced, trying to process his words. She had come to this meeting with so many questions, but now that she was standing here, facing Alden, it was as if all the answers had slipped out of her grasp. "I don't understand," she said, her voice filled with confusion. "How am I connected to any of this?" Alden took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because, Elira, you are not just a weaver. Your tapestries, your art, there is power in what you create. The stories you weave into your fabrics, the patterns you form, they are not just for beauty. They are maps that can guide people to something far greater than what they have now." Elira blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Maps? What do you mean?" Alden's expression grew more serious, and he lowered his voice as if sharing a secret. "The herbs that Lord Aldrich sought, they are only the beginning. There are things in this world that are hidden, things that few people even know exist. The marketplace, with all its trade and commerce, is a facade. It's a cover for something much darker, something that can change the course of history itself." Elira's breath caught in her throat. She had heard whispers of the marketplace's darker side, of secret dealings and forbidden trades, but she had never imagined it could be so much more than what she had seen with her own eyes. "And what does this have to do with me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What is it that I can do?" Alden paused for a moment, as though weighing his words carefully. "You have the key, Elira. The tapestries you weave, they are not just art. They are a form of communication, a way to unlock the hidden pathways of the world. You are a part of something much larger than yourself, something that has been set into motion long before you even realized." Elira shook her head, the weight of his words pressing down on her. "I don't know if I can be part of this," she said softly. "I've always just wanted to weave stories, to create beauty with my hands." Alden stepped closer, his gaze softening as he regarded her. "And that, Elira, is why you are the one who can do this. The beauty you create is not just for show. It holds meaning, power. You can shape the future with your threads, guide people to what they need or what they fear. The room felt colder now, the shadows growing deeper around them. Alira's mind swirled with confusion and fear, but there was something else there too, something she couldn't deny. The pull of curiosity, the pull of destiny perhaps, the marketplace, the noble, the herbs, and now this mysterious connection to something far greater than herself. It was all too much, and yet she felt as though she were on the verge of something profound, something that could change everything. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Alden's smile returned, but it was no longer playful. It was filled with understanding, with purpose. "You will need to weave a tapestry unlike any you've made before. A tapestry that holds the key to the marketplace's future. One that will reveal the truth hidden beneath the surface. A truth that no one can deny. The noble, Lord Aldrich, is just the beginning. There are others who are watching, others who seek what you have." Alira's heart raced as the enormity of what he was saying began to sink in. She had always believed that her work was just that. Work. A way to tell stories, to bring beauty into the world. But now, she was being told that her tapestries had the power to shape the world itself. "Do you understand now, Alira?" Alden asked, his voice calm but insistent. "You are more than just a weaver. You are the one who holds the threads of fate, and if you choose to take this path, there will be no turning back." Alira stood there in silence, her mind overwhelmed by the weight of his words. The shadows of the mill seemed to close in on her, and for a moment, it felt as though the very walls were pressing in, as though the world itself was waiting for her decision. Finally, Alira took a deep breath and nodded. "I understand." Alden's smile deepened, satisfaction in his eyes. "Good. Then it's time to begin." With those words, the mill seemed to grow even darker, the air thick with anticipation. Alira's journey was just beginning, and she could already feel the weight of the tapestry she was about to weave. As the days passed, Alira found herself retreating into her work more than ever before. The marketplace, which had once been a place of comfort and routine, now felt distant, as though it no longer belonged to her. Every corner she turned, every face she encountered, seemed to carry the weight of something unspoken. The air itself seemed thick with the invisible threads of fate that she had now become a part of, threads that she had been weaving without even realizing it. Her stall, once a simple place where she sold her tapestries, now felt like a crossroads of sorts, a place where the past and future collided. Each tapestry she created now felt like an act of creation beyond herself. As Alden had said, she was weaving the threads of fate, but the meaning of those threads was still a mystery. She could no longer view her work as mere art. It had become something else entirely. The world around her had changed, and so had she. Alira felt the weight of her new role pressing on her shoulders. The marketplace, once a place of calm exchange, was now a place where secrets moved in the shadows. She could see it in the eyes of the other merchants and townsfolk. They were all watching, waiting for something, but none of them knew what. Only Alira, and perhaps Alden, knew what was truly at stake. The noble, Lord Aldrich, had not returned to the marketplace since that fateful day. His absence only deepened the unease that had settled over the town. The people still spoke of him in hushed tones, and rumors of his mysterious dealings with Alden swirled like a fog. But even in his absence, Elira knew that he had not forgotten about the marketplace. He had seen something in the herbs, in the strange goods that were traded in secret, and he would return for it. It was only a matter of time. And then, one morning, as Elira sat at her stall, lost in thought, the air shifted again. The marketplace, once so familiar, felt different today. There was a murmur of excitement in the crowd, a buzz of anticipation that Elira couldn't ignore. She stood up and looked around, her eyes scanning the crowd, and that's when she saw him, Lord Aldrich, walking through the marketplace once more. But this time, his presence felt heavier, more commanding. He moved with purpose, his eyes sharp, taking in every detail, every face in the crowd. He was not here to make casual purchases or to simply observe. He was here for something that only he understood. As he moved through the marketplace, the crowd parted in silent reverence. The people of the town had grown used to his visits, but there was something different about this one. Lord Aldrich was no longer just a figure of authority. He was something more now, a symbol of the mystery that had taken root in the marketplace. The rumors had grown darker, and with them, the tension had risen. Elira's heart began to race. She had hoped that the noble's visit would be brief, that he would simply pass through and leave, but deep down, she knew better. This was not a visit like the others. This was a moment of reckoning. She had no choice but to watch as Lord Aldrich's entourage moved closer, his gaze sweeping over the stalls, his eyes narrowing as he passed by the vendors. The air seemed to grow colder as he came nearer to Elira's stall. For a moment, their eyes met, and Elira felt a shiver run down her spine. Lord Aldrich's gaze was intense, piercing, as though he could see into the very depths of her soul. She held her breath, unsure of what he might say or do. He stopped in front of her stall, his eyes scanning the tapestries she had displayed. She had been careful to choose the most intricate of her works, the ones that carried the deepest meanings, the ones that felt like they held more than just threads and fabric. "You make beautiful work, Elira," he said, his voice low and almost thoughtful. There was no warmth in his words, no kindness, only an unspoken challenge. "Your tapestries are intriguing." Elira's heart skipped a beat, and she struggled to keep her composure. She had known this moment would come, but now that it was here, she felt unprepared. "Thank you, my lord," she managed to say, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. Lord Aldrich's gaze remained fixed on her, his eyes narrowing slightly as he leaned closer, examining one of her tapestries. "These," he said, pointing to the intricate patterns woven into the fabric. "These hold meaning, don't they? They are more than just decoration, aren't they?" Elira swallowed hard, her throat dry. "Yes, my lord," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Each one tells a story." He smiled, but it was a cold, calculating smile. "A story, indeed, but I believe there's more to these stories than you know, Elira. I believe your tapestries hold secrets, secrets that could change the fate of the marketplace, of this town." Elira's heart raced as his words sank in. Could he know? Could he have figured out what she was truly weaving, the deeper meaning behind her work? She had always created her tapestries to tell stories, to capture the essence of the world around her. But now she realized that there was more at play here than she had ever imagined. Lord Aldrich was not here to admire her work. He was here to take it, to use it for something far greater, something far darker. Before she could respond, Lord Aldrich straightened and turned to leave, his entourage following close behind. "I will be watching you, Elira," he called over his shoulder, his voice carrying a weight of finality. "And when the time is right, I will take what is mine." The words hung in the air like a threat, and Elira's knees felt weak beneath her. She had known that Lord Aldrich's interest in the marketplace was not casual, but now she understood the depth of his intentions. He was not just seeking goods or trade. He was seeking power, and he believed that her tapestries held the key to unlocking it. As the noble disappeared into the crowd, Elira stood frozen, her mind reeling with the implications of what had just happened. The marketplace, once a place of simple trade, had become a battleground, a place where secrets were being uncovered and the balance of power was shifting. The threads she had been weaving, the stories she had been telling, were now part of a larger narrative, one that was unfolding in the shadows. And Elira realized that there was no turning back now. She was caught in the web of fate, and the choices she made would determine the future of the marketplace, and perhaps her own future as well. As the days followed, the marketplace continued its rhythm, but it no longer felt the same. The arrival of Lord Aldrich had unsettled the delicate balance that had once held the town together. Whispers of his intentions and of the power he seemed to covet spread like wildfire through the streets, reaching every corner of the marketplace. The air was thick with anticipation, and beneath it, a current of fear flowed silently, threatening to rise to the surface. Elira's mind was consumed by the encounter with Lord Aldrich. His words had been haunting, lingering in her thoughts long after he had left. "I will be watching you," he had said. It wasn't a simple warning. It was a promise. The weight of that promise pressed down on her, making each breath feel heavier, as though the very air had thickened around her. The marketplace, once a place of simplicity and routine, now seemed to pulse with secrets. Every merchant's glance, every hurried conversation, felt like a part of a larger game, one in which Elira had unknowingly become a player. The noble, Lord Aldrich, was not just a figure of power, he was a shadow that loomed over everything, and his presence was felt in every stall, every corner, every exchange. Elira found herself walking through the market each day, her eyes scanning the crowd, her senses heightened. She could feel the tension in the air, the way the people seemed to move just a little more quickly, the way they spoke in hushed tones. No one wanted to acknowledge the change, but it was there, undeniable. The marketplace had become a place where trust was fragile, where every deal might hold hidden meaning, and where even the most innocent exchange could carry the weight of something far darker. One afternoon, as Elira worked on a new tapestry, her fingers moving deftly between the threads, she felt a presence behind her. It was subtle at first, a quiet shift in the air, but it was enough to make her pause. She turned, expecting to see a familiar face, a customer perhaps, or one of the other vendors. But it wasn't anyone she recognized. Instead, standing before her, was a figure cloaked in shadow, their face obscured by the hood of their dark cloak. "Elira," the figure said, their voice low and smooth, like the whisper of wind through the trees. "We need to talk." Elira's heart skipped a beat. She recognized the voice, though she couldn't quite place it. Her fingers instinctively tightened around the tapestry, but she forced herself to relax. There was something about this person, something familiar, and yet something unsettling. "Who are you?" Elira asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. The figure stepped forward, lowering their hood to reveal a face Elira had seen many times before. It was Tomas, the young apprentice, but his appearance seemed different. There was a sharpness in his eyes, an intensity that Elira hadn't noticed before. His once carefree demeanor had been replaced by something darker, more determined. "I told you before to be careful," Thomas said, his voice now edged with urgency. "But now, things are moving faster than we expected. Alden, he's been gathering people who are in a position to change everything." Elira's stomach twisted with unease. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thomas glanced around quickly, his eyes darting between the stalls and the people passing by. "Alden has been working with Lord Aldrich's people. He's not just a trader, he's a player in something much larger. The herbs, the tapestries, they're all part of a much bigger plan. And you're in the middle of it." Elira's mind raced. She had suspected as much. There was something about Alden's words, the way he had spoken of her tapestries, that had felt off. But hearing it now, from Thomas, confirmed her worst fears. She was not simply caught up in the ordinary life of a weaver. She had unwittingly become a key figure in a struggle for power, one that reached far beyond the marketplace. "But I don't understand," Elira said, her voice trembling slightly. "What do they want from me? What do they want with my tapestries?" Tomas's expression darkened. "It's not just the tapestries. It's what they represent. You're weaving more than just art, Elira. You're weaving the path to something greater. The patterns you create, they can unlock the secrets of the marketplace. They can show where power lies, where alliances are formed, and where the future is heading. And Alden, he's been using that knowledge to get closer to Lord Aldrich." Elira shook her head, trying to process what Thomas was saying. It was too much to take in at once, too much to understand. She had always seen her tapestries as stories, as reflections of the world around her. But now, she realized, they were much more than that. They were maps, guides, keys to something that could change everything. "You need to be careful," Thomas continued, his voice urgent. "There are forces at play here that you can't control. Alden and Lord Aldrich are not just interested in the market. They want power, real power, and they think that your tapestries hold the key to unlocking it." Elira's mind swirled with confusion. She had always been content with her simple life, creating beauty, telling stories through the threads she wove. But now, it seemed, the world she had known was slipping away, replaced by a web of intrigue and danger that she couldn't escape. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How can I stop this?" Thomas hesitated, his eyes dark with uncertainty. "I don't know. But I know that you can't do this alone. Alden is playing a dangerous game, and Lord Aldrich is the key to everything. If you want to stop them, you have to understand what they're really after." Elira nodded slowly, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. She had been given a glimpse into a world she had never imagined, a world where her art, her craft, held more power than she had ever known. And now she had to decide what to do with that power. As Thomas turned to leave, he paused, looking back at her with a serious expression. "Be careful, Elira. There's more at stake here than just the marketplace. If Alden and Lord Aldrich get what they want, no one will be safe." With those final words, Thomas disappeared into the crowd, leaving Elira standing alone at her stall, her heart heavy with the weight of the choices she now had to make. The marketplace, once so familiar, had become a battleground, and Elira had no idea where her role in it would lead. The days following Tomas's warning were quiet, but Elira could feel the stillness in the air like a storm waiting to break. The marketplace, which had once been a place of comfort, now felt like a cage, a space where secrets festered, and where Elira had become entangled in a web far larger than she had ever imagined. Every corner she turned, every familiar face she passed, seemed to carry an air of suspicion, as if the entire town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Elira's once simple existence, spent weaving stories into her tapestries, had been turned upside down. Her art, which had always felt like a peaceful form of expression, now held a weight of responsibility. She had learned that her tapestries were not just works of beauty. They were keys to something much larger, something that Alden and Lord Aldrich wanted to control. And for the first time, Elira was forced to confront the possibility that her craft might be the only thing standing between the marketplace and whatever dark future these men had in mind. But how could she stop them? How could she confront a noble as powerful as Lord Aldrich, or even Alden, whose connections seemed to stretch beyond the marketplace and into the very fabric of the town's hidden networks? Elira knew she needed answers, but the more she searched for them, the more the questions piled up. She was like a weaver in a vast, tangled web, trying to find the right thread to pull. The only thing she knew for certain was that she couldn't do it alone. Thomas's warning echoed in her mind, but despite his urgency, there was something in his eyes that made her doubt his own ability to see this through. He had warned her of the dangers, but had he truly grasped the depths of what was unfolding? That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elira made her decision. She would seek out Alden. She had to confront him, to understand once and for all what he was truly after, and whether he could be stopped. But the thought of meeting him alone in the dark corners of the mill or some other hidden place filled her with dread. She had no way of knowing whether Alden was still the mysterious figure she had met weeks ago, or whether he had become something far more dangerous. As she made her way through the dimly lit streets, the once familiar path now seemed to stretch out endlessly before her. She passed the stalls where she had once spent her days, now abandoned and silent in the evening quiet. The marketplace, though empty of traders, still felt alive with the hum of invisible forces, of secrets lurking just beneath the surface. The old mill loomed ahead, its silhouette dark against the night sky. It had always been a place of mystery, a relic of the past, and now it seemed to beckon her like an old wound that refused to heal. Elira's heart beat faster as she stepped closer, the cool night air sending shivers through her. She didn't know what she expected to find in the mill, but she knew she couldn't turn back now. She had to understand what Alden was doing and what he had planned for the marketplace. When she reached the mill's door, she paused. Her breath shallow, she listened for any sounds from within. The stillness was unnerving, and she could feel the tension building in the pit of her stomach. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The creak of the hinges echoed in the silence, but no other sounds followed. The room inside was shrouded in darkness, the only light coming from a thin sliver of moonlight that cut through a crack in the walls. "Elira," Alden's voice came from the shadows, smooth and steady, like the calm before a storm. "I knew you would come." She didn't answer at first, her heart racing in her chest. His words felt like a trap, like he had been waiting for this moment, for her to step into his world. The shadows in the room shifted, and Elira's eyes slowly adjusted, revealing Alden's figure standing in the far corner. He was no longer the calm, mysterious figure she had met weeks ago. His eyes were sharper now, colder, and there was an intensity to him that made Elira uneasy. "You've been busy," Elira said quietly, her voice betraying none of the fear that gripped her. "But I still don't understand." Why all of this? What do you want with my tapestries? With the marketplace? Alden stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. I told you, Alira, he said, his voice almost soothing. You are not just a weaver. You are a key. And the tapestries you create, they hold the answers to a question that has been asked for generations. Alira's mind whirled, but she tried to keep her composure. What question? She asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. Alden's eyes glinted in the moonlight, and for a moment, he looked almost pleased. The question of power, he said softly. The question of who controls the marketplace, and by extension, who controls the town, the trade, the flow of resources. Lord Aldrich and I are not the first to seek it, but we are the ones who will succeed. Alira's heart skipped a beat. So, it's all about power, she said quietly. Not just the herbs or the tapestries, but everything. You've been manipulating the marketplace, turning it into a battleground for control. Alden nodded, his expression almost pitying. Power, Alira, is not a thing you can simply take. It's a thing you build piece by piece, and it starts with the marketplace, with the flow of goods, the flow of information. What you create, the stories woven into your tapestries, they're more than just decoration. They are the foundation of what comes next. They will tell us the future. They will show us the path to where we want to go. Alira took a step back, her mind reeling from his words. The future? Was that what Alden and Lord Aldrich were after? Not just the present, but the power to shape what was to come. And had she, in her simple pursuit of beauty, unknowingly given them the tools to do so? Why me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why my tapestries? Why not someone else? Alden's eyes softened, though there was no warmth in his gaze. Because you are the one who sees it. You're the one who understands what's at stake. Your art is the key to everything. Only you can unlock it. For a moment, Alira was silent, her thoughts spinning. She had come here looking for answers, but now she realized that the answers were more complicated than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just a part of a larger story. She was at the center of it. And with that realization, Alira understood the terrible truth. There was no going back. The days following her confrontation with Alden were a blur, as if the very air around Alira had thickened and become heavier, suffused with the weight of knowledge and decisions she had never asked for. The marketplace, once a place of quiet rhythm, now felt like a battlefield. Every corner, every shadow, held secrets, and every face she passed seemed to carry a silent warning. Alden's words echoed in her mind, filling the space where her thoughts once rested. She was no longer simply a weaver of stories. She was caught in the weave of something far greater. As the days went on, Alira's life in the marketplace became increasingly strained. Her once simple work of crafting tapestries now felt like a delicate balancing act. Each thread she wove seemed imbued with a hidden significance, each pattern a map leading to something unknown, something dangerous. Alden's cryptic words about power and control gnawed at her, making her question every decision, every movement. Her hands, which had once known only the rhythmic flow of weaving, now trembled slightly with the weight of what was unfolding around her. And then, there was the noble Lord Aldrich. The marketplace had buzzed with his return, and though his presence was commanding, it was no longer met with the same quiet reverence. People whispered in hushed tones, their conversations laced with a mixture of awe and fear. He was a shadow that loomed over the town, and Alira could feel it in the very air, like a storm on the horizon that everyone could sense, but no one could stop. One evening, after the market had closed and the stalls were being packed up, Alira walked slowly through the now empty streets. The soft sounds of the night, distant voices, the rustle of leaves, the occasional creak of an old building settling filled the air, but it was the quiet between those sounds that unnerved her. It was as if the world were holding its breath, waiting for something to break the silence. She passed the old mill, and for a moment, her steps faltered. She had not gone back there since her meeting with Alden. But tonight, the pull to return was undeniable. There was something she had missed in their conversation, something Alden had left unsaid, something hidden between the lines. Her heart heavy with uncertainty, Alira turned down the familiar path toward the mill. The air was colder than usual, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer, reaching across the road like fingers from the past. When she reached the mill, the door stood slightly ajar, as though it had been waiting for her. She hesitated, her breath catching in her throat, but the urge to understand what was happening, to find the truth that had eluded her, drove her forward. She pushed the door open, and the familiar musty scent of the mill filled her nostrils. Inside, the mill was just as she remembered it, dark and silent, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon through cracks in the walls. But this time, the atmosphere felt different. The shadows were deeper, more oppressive, as though something had changed within the very walls of the mill. Alira, Alden's voice came from the shadows, smooth and calm, though there was an underlying tension that sent a shiver down her spine. I knew you'd return. You're not ready to let go, are you? Her heart thudded in her chest, but she steeled herself, drawing in a deep breath. No, she said, her voice steady despite the fear that churned inside her. I'm not ready to let go. I need to understand. What are you really doing, Alden? What is Lord Aldrich after? Alden stepped into the dim light, his face unreadable. It's not about what Lord Aldrich is after, Alira, he said slowly, as though choosing his words carefully. It's about what we all seek. Power, control, the ability to shape the future, to change the very fabric of this world. Alira's pulse quickened, the gravity of his words settling in her chest like a stone. And you think that's what my tapestries will do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alden nodded. Not just your tapestries. Your art. Your ability to weave the future. You see, Alira, the marketplace is just the beginning. It's a conduit, a place where everything converges. The power, the people, the secrets, and you. He paused, his gaze locking with hers. You are the one who can unlock it all. The room seemed to close in on her. The air felt thick, like it was charged with something dangerous. What do you mean? She whispered. What do you want me to do? Alden's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked almost sympathetic. You've been creating maps all along, Alira, he said quietly. Maps that can lead us to what we truly want. You don't need to be afraid of this power. You've already touched it, with every tapestry you've woven. You've seen the patterns that connect everything. Alira felt her chest tighten. I don't want this, she said, her voice shaky. I didn't ask for this. Alden's gaze hardened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something darker in his eyes. But it doesn't matter what you want, Alira, he said, his voice cold. What matters is what you can give, and you will give it, because you are the key. The weight of his words sank into Alira's bones, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse. Her mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle finally beginning to fall into place. The tapestries, The marketplace, Lord Aldrich, Alden, everything was connected. But the deeper she went, the darker the path became, and now she realized she had reached a crossroads, a point of no return. "Tell me, Elira," Alden said, his voice low, almost like a murmur. "Do you understand now? This is not just about the marketplace. It's about everything. Everything we've been building, and everything we will become." Elira felt a chill run down her spine. She had been drawn into something much larger than herself, and there was no escaping it now. "I understand," she whispered. And as those words left her lips, the mill seemed to close around her, its dark corners swallowing the last vestiges of her former life. The threads she had been weaving for so long were now tangled in the hands of those who sought power, and Elira was no longer just the weaver. She was part of the design. The days after Elira's encounter with Alden passed in a strange, suspended silence. It was as though the town itself had entered a state of waiting, as if the very air had been held in anticipation of something that had yet to arrive. The marketplace, which had once been a place of daily trade and interaction, now felt empty in a way that went beyond the absence of merchants. There was an unspoken tension, a fear of the unknown, and in Elira, a growing realization that her involvement in this web of power and secrets was far deeper than she had ever imagined. Her work at the stall slowed. She no longer felt the familiar comfort of weaving patterns into fabric, no longer felt the simple joy of creating beauty. Instead, every thread she touched seemed to carry the weight of a future she could no longer control. Every piece of cloth she worked with seemed to hold a key to something much darker than the stories she had once sought to tell. Lord Aldrich's presence in the marketplace had grown more pronounced. He moved through the streets with a quiet authority, his eyes sharp, watching every transaction, every exchange. The noble was no longer just a figure of power. He was an embodiment of it, a shadow that hung over every corner of the town. His reach was growing, and Elira could feel it in every whispered conversation, in every look exchanged behind closed doors. Alden had been right about one thing. Her tapestries held power. She had woven maps, yes, but they were not maps to treasure or hidden riches. They were maps to the future, to the flow of power, to the people who could control it. And she had never asked for any of it. But now, the future was unfolding before her, and there was no turning back. On the eve of the full moon, Elira found herself walking once more toward the old mill. The streets were quiet, the shadows long, and the cool night air seemed to carry with it the weight of everything she had learned. She had not returned to the mill since her last meeting with Alden, but tonight, something felt different. The time had come for her to make a choice, one that would determine the course of her life and the fate of the marketplace. As she approached the mill, she felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. The fear that had gripped her in the days following her encounter with Alden had faded, replaced by something else. Acceptance, perhaps. She had no idea what awaited her inside, but she knew it was time to face whatever truth lay within the walls of that crumbling building. The door creaked open as she pushed it, and the familiar musty scent of the mill filled her nostrils. The shadows inside seemed deeper than before, as though the mill itself were waiting for her. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the silence, and soon she saw him. Alden stood in the center of the room, his back to her, his silhouette framed by the pale light of the moon that filtered through the cracks in the walls. "You've come," he said, his voice smooth, like the hum of a distant lullaby. "I knew you would." Elira didn't respond immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, her fingers twitching at her sides. "What now?" she asked quietly, her voice steady, but laced with a quiet resolve. Alden turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers with a calm, almost indifferent gaze. "Now," he said, his voice soft, "we finish what we started. We bring the future into being." Elira swallowed, the weight of his words sinking deep into her chest. She had always been a weaver, a creator of stories, but now her craft had taken on a weightier, more dangerous purpose. The tapestries she had once woven for beauty now held the threads of power and destiny, and she was the one who had been chosen to weave them. "You don't have to do this, Elira," Alden continued, his voice like silk. "You don't have to walk this path if you don't want to. But you know as well as I do that there is no going back. You are the one who will shape the future, one thread at a time." Elira's mind raced, but her hands remained still at her sides. She had no choice but to face the truth now. She had been a part of this game from the very beginning. Her tapestries, her art, had drawn Lord Aldrich's attention, and now she was entangled in something far larger than herself. She stepped forward, her heart steady despite the fear that threatened to rise within her. "Then show me," she said softly. "Show me what I need to do." Alden's lips curled into a smile, his eyes glinting with a mixture of satisfaction and something else, something that felt far colder. "Very well," he said. "It's time to complete the tapestry." To weave the final pattern, he led her to a table where an unfinished tapestry lay, its edges frayed, its center a chaotic blend of colors and shapes that Elira had never seen before. It was unlike any of the tapestries she had ever created. There was no story here, no beauty, only a map, twisted and tangled, a vision of a world waiting to be shaped. "This is the final piece," Alden said, his voice low. "The tapestry that will unlock everything. The future, power, the marketplace. It all hinges on this moment." Elira stood silently before the tapestry, her mind whirling. She could feel the weight of Alden's words pressing down on her. She was being asked to complete something that had already been set in motion, a force that had been building for years, if not longer. And now, she was the one who would decide how it would unfold. Her fingers hovered over the tapestry, trembling slightly as she traced the threads with her eyes. She knew that with each choice she made, each thread she wove, she would be shaping the world. She could feel the weight of it, the responsibility. And yet, there was a strange sense of peace that came with it as well. She had always believed that she was simply a weaver of stories, but now she understood. She was a weaver of destiny. With a steady breath, Elira took the first thread in her hand and began to weave. Each movement was deliberate, calm, and measured. She knew what had to be done. And as the tapestry took shape beneath her fingers, she felt the power of it, felt the future unfolding, one thread at a time. And as the last thread was woven into place, the tapestry was complete. A silence fell over the room, heavy and expectant, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Elira stood back, her heart pounding, and looked at the tapestry in front of her. The map was finished, the future laid bare. But now, the only question that remained was, what would she do with it?